Hi, great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining AI and Finance Strategies for Success. We really appreciate your time, and we're glad you've joined us today. We have a really, I would say, forward-thinking and exciting discussion ahead. Just to kind of outline what we'll be doing today, we're going to start off with an introduction of our panel, and then we're going to go into three sections. One entitled the state of Treasury. Section 2 will be Treasury use cases, and Section 3 will be technology and Treasury. And then at the end of the webinar, we would love to open up for questions from the audience. So just to get started, I'd love to introduce our panelists. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Just to get started, my name is 𝗦𝘁𝗿𝗶𝗲𝗀. I am head of growth here at WaveAccess. I've been in technology and between services and software for the better part of 20 years. I'm really excited about the developments with AI and the fact that really all companies now are based in technology. It's really exciting that if you look at banks, if you look at literally any industry, it's all rooted in the technology that they have. So that's exciting for me. I want to turn it over to Cindy to introduce herself. Cindy?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever appropriate greeting it is for where you are when you're watching this webinar. I'm Cindy Newton, and I actually have been a finance and treasury leader and practitioner for most of my career. It was my last experience where I was system director of treasury operations for Baylor Scott and White Health in Texas, which is the largest healthcare system in the state. We like to do things really big here. That I actually began to really dive into a deep journey about treasury operations and how to strategically improve those, and took me to actually the career place where I am now, where I'm actually a senior managing consultant for PFM Treasury Group Consulting. So I actually get to go and do the favorite parts of my job that I did when I was a practitioner with other larger healthcare systems, higher ed, and municipalities, and it leads me into great discussions like this. I'm delighted to be a part of this discussion, and I know we're going to have some great conversation this morning. Tanya?
Thanks, Cindy. Yes, my name is 𝗬𝗂𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗀. I'm currently Director of Treasury and Cash Cycle Transformation at Baptist Healthcare. I've joined healthcare industry about 4 years ago, and prior to this, I was in retail industry. I would say most of my career I spent in retail. And I've been in corporate treasury for about 20 years so far, and I am a big fan of technology. So thanks WaveAccess and thanks Neil for inviting me to join this group. I'm really excited to be on this panel today, and really looking forward to this discussion because this is an independent event, and so it's just product agnostic, and I'm really happy to talk about technology, about future of treasury, and what we really need to be doing. How do we prepare for the future and such things. Just a quick disclaimer, this event does not offer CTP credits for anyone who is used to joining treasury related events, but still a ton of good content, so I'm excited for it. Vladimir?
Thanks, Tanya. Vladimir?
Hello, everyone. My name is Vladimir. I'm the head of data science in WaveAccess. I've been doing IT and machine learning for the last 13 years, I think, or something like that. I lost count at this point. We've done quite a few different projects in finance, in computer vision, in healthcare, all sorts of stuff. So I just hope I will be able to contribute here today in terms of explaining some of the technical aspects and applications of machine learning and AI in this domain field, in the treasury field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So jumping right into it, and really quickly before, if someone has to jump off or they need to leave for a few minutes, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar after the webinar. So don't worry, you will get the full content of this. So jumping right into our first section and first topic is the state of Treasury. And Cindy, I'd like to ask you a question. In your view, what are the most significant trends you're seeing in Treasury management today?
Well, thank you. I think it's a great place for us to start our discussion today. I think we can all agree, just an opening statement, that we're living in a world of information overload. We're bombarded with information. And I think that that's one of the huge things that's driving a lot of the discussions that I have with Treasury departments across a spectrum of different business verticals, is looking at, we have so much information. How can we begin to, and it's so important because, in Treasury, as we know, there's not a dollar that comes in, a dollar that goes out that we as Treasury professionals don't see. So, we learned through COVID that we really have a very important seat at the table, because we were the only place in finance where we could actually predict whether we were going to have enough cash in the bank to make payroll. And it became acknowledged that Treasury was the piece of finance that's the only one that's future looking. And so it really has elevated our conversations that we have at the table of our leadership of our organizations. And so it's brought us forward, and we know that we've got a dynamic landscape of information that's coming at us that we want to share. But we are still bogged down with a lot of things. So what am I seeing in Treasury? That's my kind of lead-in question, I think, is how to deal with all of this information that we need to get out. One of the things that I think people are really looking at is looking at the current state of Treasury. Let's pause and take a deep dive Treasury assessment. That's what we're working with lots of clients with. It's certainly something that when I was practicing, it was in my own organization, that we did very regularly. We looked to see what were we doing, assessing. And this is a way of future-proofing ourselves if we actually begin to take that look and be nimble in how we are going to actually approach what goes on in Treasury. Treasury is the new kid on the block related to finance. And if you look at it in that way, we actually were oftentimes a place that came out of the accounting hallway. And so with that, we actually had a lot of responsibilities and tasks that came with us and that we brought with us. And so one of the things that we're really seeing and evaluating in Treasury now is the fact that it's time to say goodbye to some of those things that are not core Treasury responsibilities. To do that assessment, what should be in Treasury? It's not just a matter of right-sizing Treasury, because we all can agree that we are never going to have as many employees in that Treasury department as we think we would like to have. It's also a matter of gaining efficiency by ridding ourselves of things that are no longer what we should be doing. And as we're doing that, then we also take an assessment of what processes do we have in place. And many of them are very manual, because we want to get information out of just a multitude of systems. This is what really will lead us to embrace and understand that we need some of the technologies that we're going to be talking about over the course of this next hour in order to actually optimize and get at that data and present it to leadership and ourselves for more real-time decision making. It's not that we don't know how to get at the data. It's the fact that we don't have the time to do it. So how can we take our processes? What are those manual processes that are keeping us from really adopting a machine learning tool or an AI model to do something that we know would be better, but we're so burdened with our own manual processes? That in and of itself actually leads us to be able to start having those discussions about driving incremental change and moving from just a tactical to a strategic Treasury department. It allows us to take that step back, kind of almost with a clean sheet of paper, and say, if we draw this out from scratch, what does Treasury look like? And then that gives us something to move forward and work on. It also allows us to, I think, prepare for the paradigm shift that we are seeing, not just in Treasury, but in the workplace in general, as we prepare for this generational shift that actually demands technology in the workplace in order to be efficient and do our job. So I'll pause there and see if any of that resonated with the team, if we need to expand on what I talked about there, or ask some questions just among our Treasury panel team.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Tanya, I'd love to hear your thoughts on on Cindy's comments.
Absolutely. Yes. And Cindy, thank you for this great intro. I agree on so many levels. And I think and I like to say that the biggest problem corporate treasury has right now is that many companies of, notable size, they don't have treasury. And that's still a thing. So as you just said, it's relatively, well, it's been around, but it's relatively new concept in so many industries and for many companies. Very, very often I see that either controller or accounting, CFO directly kind of are responsible for tasks that probably could have been placed in a bucket of treasury management, not even cash management only, but treasury management is a bit broader kind of scope. And the function of treasury is still misunderstood on many levels. But I think it is important to talk about it and to differentiate and kind of understand the scope and this function better for many finance professionals, because it can be so beneficial, especially, again, I agree that all the tasks, well, most of the operations and transactions either start with cash or they end with cash in an organization. So not only it is beneficial to track assets as we do with financial statements and all of that, but also track and predict and forecast cash flow better, because it's a different flow completely. So I think it's very beneficial to kind of progress in the profession, and technology is a big part of it, obviously.
Tanya, thank you very much. The second question is for you. And so you talk about the trends. Can you talk a little bit more about how these trends have impacted treasury operations in recent months, quarters, years? Are there specific examples you can point to in your daily work that where some of these updated processes and this forward-thinking approach has made your life easier?
Certainly, yeah, that's a great question, and I strongly believe that good process management is the core, it's the foundation for to bring value to the organization, for any improvements in performance. They just all start with the process, the underlying process. So, and I think during COVID we've seen many deviations, so to speak, from our regular processes and trends, and our statistical models didn't work in certain times when we were expecting certain cash coming in, and it didn't because of some disruptions that we've seen. So what I'm trying to say here is that we are relying on the underlying process. But again, to reiterate on what Cindy just said, the nimbleness, the online data, we need to have more robust and online access to the data that we're using. And so I think what the lesson we've learned from recent years is that time matters. And I think the consensus lately has been that, okay, if you have a reporting system or a process that involves, let's say, any external parties, like a vendor that helps you manage certain process and such, a few days to get a report is an all right kind of time frame. But in reality, it's not. Even a few hours time sometimes is too much time, because sometimes you need to make a decision about drawing a line of credit, understanding what your cash position exactly is at a certain given time, right? So we in Treasury are making decisions that affect the bottom line. And the expenses here, especially if you're talking, for example, about borrowing or losing a window for opportunity in investing. So the consequences can be really high dollars. So we do need this data available for us, and we need access to it. And sometimes, and again, this session today is not necessary, it's kind of future forward looking. So I just want to stress that we need to get more access to more data, not to overflow ourselves, because I agree we're so constrained in resources, but we need to use some data, get access to and analyzing this data quickly, and quick access to decisions based on this data. I think that's the goal for many of us right now.
Cindy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Yeah, no. I was going to ask you. Jump right in.
I was going to interject. I think that the trends, it's such an important thing that Tanya was talking about. And, one of the things, I've attended, when I was a practitioner, I've attended so many so many conferences, so many webinars, so many different seminars where they're talking about how to do a cash forecast. And if you go down to just the mechanics of all of that, there was so much emphasis on, you need to get it right. How much is your variance? You need to be clearing out your variance. And I think that one of the things that we really saw and learned is that sometimes that variance is telling us actually a trend we need to pay attention to. It's the anomaly and digging into that. And so today, as Tanya was talking, it's not that we humans can't dig down into that and figure it out. It's the timeline that Tanya was talking about to get at that data. You don't have 2 or 3 weeks to go analyze a revenue stream that suddenly was looking off to you. You need to be able to get down into that and figure out, well, what's happened here? Is that a one-time thing? Was it an error? Well, let's identify that. But was it a one-time thing? Or is this becoming a trend that we need to pay attention to? And that's one of the things that I think that in cash forecasting, we really learned and began to adapt differently after COVID, because all of those historical models, our traditional trend lines were all just blown sky high. I won't bore you with a huge example in healthcare, but there was a huge one there in the fact that related to the Medicare advances, that it really began to really just blow all of those trend lines. At the beginning of that, the bottom line on the financial statements looked terrible, but Treasury, we had lots of money because the government flushed it on in. Then when the financials began to turn around, that's when it really became an interesting conversation to have with leadership saying, okay, we have to pay this money back now. So we're being, we're being clawed back in the Medicare payments back. And that's when you started having, we're not going to have enough money to make payroll. That, those different kind of conversations, or we're challenging a credit metric that needs to be there. So I think it began to really point to that timeliness that Tanya was talking about, and really escalate the fact that we've got to do this better and faster. And, it's where tools like we are starting to have give us the power to actually do that and pay attention to not only the trends, but really pay attention to the anomalies and give leadership some power and in their toolkit to do something about it in time.
Cindy, thank you so much for those comments. Tanya, I wanted to turn it back to you to say, have there been any sort of things that you've seen that would help bring Treasury into, we talked a lot about the data and making sure that your data is right and looking at trends. Have there been any tools or any sort of that you've seen, or any sort of technology that's caught your attention that you see could be of a great benefit to Treasury management?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we can mention many things, and we already touched on forecasting here. Let me shift gears a little bit and talk about working capital management, because I feel that this is often an underrepresented, kind of a topic that it can be so hard to actually kind of dig in and make a difference, but it's just so important. And I think working capital management and improvements in working capital should be on the agenda of CFOs, and it should get more attention from the leadership standpoint, and then getting more prioritized for finance departments and Treasury as well, because there is, as always, cash component in it. So, but I think this is the area where receivables management department and payables and Treasury can and should work together. So again, we are talking about future technology today, most of all here. And I think the future is really bright in terms of us trying to make an effort and then continuous improvements in areas like receivables management and payables management. And just kind of, I think there is so much potential for this newer technology to help us on many levels, starting with, again, yes, you can do, and I've seen few projects that were, were targeting working capital management improvements, and like they all start with okay, let's analyze our receivables. Let's separate them by bucket. This is 30 days, this is 60 days, this is overdue, things like that. And then we drill down, and kind of look in more granularity by each customer, and all sorts of things. This is a one-time lift because it's such a huge lift for organization. And then you do take action items, and then you close the project, and you may have achieved certain results. You may, the organization can be really happy with the results. But the main flaw I see every time is that it requires continuous effort. This is something you need to be doing on the ongoing basis. And so sometimes it is not enough to measure your days receivables or days payables once a quarter, once a month. Sometimes it's not enough to measure it weekly. And it's actually requires certain degree of sophistication to measure these things on a regular basis and with regular granularity. And if something cannot be measured, it cannot be improved. So there you have it. So for us to kind of continue going with all of those great initiatives that from time to time our organization starts, so to continue improvement, we just need extra help. So my hope and kind of vision for the future is also to have this help, to help us work cross-functionally with other cash generating or cash spending divisions in our organizations, and work as a team with some help from technology that could just do a temperature check, so to speak, from time to time, and just show us, are we still on track with something that we should be on track with? So that's another area that I'm really hopeful will be, will gain a lot of improvements from newer technology.
And
Tanya, thank you.
Can I just tack on one thing?
Please.
Because she triggered something.
Absolutely.
So I do think that she brings out such a great point about the working capital management, because that's such a dynamic area within, and Treasury has a role to play there. But I think that you really begin to recognize the fact that these cash flows within the working capital management, and also, of course, within cash forecasting, that they actually have behaviors, and those behaviors change over time. And so it's like, to her point, just calculating that, once a quarter, twice a year, whatever, is really no longer enough, because we've got the behaviors of those underlying components that are constantly changing. And I know later, because I've seen the slides, I know later that we're going to be talking about some technology and some use cases that really illustrate the importance of that, whether it ends up being just how to relate to your customers, to approach them to pay their bill, or approach them to for you to pay your suppliers. I mean, there's so many dynamic things in there that are very exciting if we can get at that data in a quick fashion and use some of the tools we're going to be talking about to get that. Adds a ton of value.
So Cindy, thank you so much. And I think that's a great segue into the role of technology and really moving into the technology component. And Vladimir's been waiting so patiently, and he is an extraordinary data scientist. He's been working with AI before he even knew what AI was, truly. Vladimir, I want to turn it over to you. I want to talk about, and here, let me just, I just got to flip to the next slide, which is just talking about some Treasury use cases. I'd love for you to talk about two use cases. One is credit score risk assessment, and the other one is billing process automation. Why don't we start with credit score risk assessment? Can you just talk through your experience with developing these for companies and how it benefits them? And then I'd love to hear Cindy and Tanya's take on how it could benefit their organizations and then other people's organizations. So Vladimir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. So credit risk assessment, credit score risk assessment is probably one of the most, I don't want to say basic, but let's say widespread tasks that are out there in terms of machine learning and AI. There are so many different companies that tried dealing with this problem, and well, it actually does work. The key here is that each time even if we're just talking about banks, for example, for each bank there are certain processes in their business that make it slightly different. For Treasury, it's the same. Let's say, for example, we're talking about an average customer that we had with a similar request where they wanted credit score risk assessment for their clients. And due to it not being a huge task in terms of complexity and resources, after a couple of months of development and integration, we were able to improve their credit scoring accuracy. Their managers were actually able to process a lot more people and make a lot less mistakes, therefore increasing their revenue, and also, as a side effect, improving the client experience, even though some of those clients obviously got denied, but for a good reason. And those who were actually capable of and were a good opportunity for the bank, they got their credit. And they got their answer a lot faster. So this is something that could be integrated really fast and easy, because it's a task that has been done quite a lot of times already at this point.
And then, so what I think is interesting, and something that Vladimir says all the time that I just want to interject quickly is, the data has to be good. He always says trash in, trash out. In order, and I think this is something we need to emphasize during this webinar, is the fact that in order to get into machine learning, and we're going to get into some of the questions about machine learning and AI, the data has to be good, the data has to be right. So you got to start at the core of what you have, which is your data, and ensure that it's properly stored, that you have the right data, that it's normalized, in order to do all these great things with it. But thank you for that. The next one that I want you to discuss is just talking a little bit about automating billing processes. Billing process automation. Vladimir?
Yeah, this is actually
that use case.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, because the billing process is, I would say, a more complicated issue, because it's very heavily dependent on the specific processes that are applied in a company. So if we're talking about the Treasury subject field, even if we're talking about the billing process automation in general, it's a very generic and broad term. But each time, both with the credit risk assessment and with this part, with billing process automation, there are different ways you can implement. So for example, let's say we can automate invoice generation, or we can personalize billing if we're talking about some business, some process that involve close communication with the client. Maybe it's about error detection and correction. The key here is to specify which problem in this process is the bottleneck for you, because what works for one will not work for another. We need to look at the data, we need to look at what actually causes the most pain, and then choose to act accordingly. So it's just a good opportunity to start with as a concept in general. But then I want to emphasize that you always want to narrow everything down to very specific goals and very specific KPIs that you want to achieve.
Vladimir, thank you very much. Cindy and Tanya, I want to turn it over to you. I don't know what to start first, but how can these technologies enhance Treasury operations? And you can even take bits and pieces of these use cases, because there's lots of things you can do with the data, but I'd love to hear your take on how this could help you and how this could potentially help others.
Well, I'm happy to start. I was thinking as Vladimir was talking about, I was in some meetings several months ago, and one of the things that was talked about was a use case that kind of combines elements out of both use cases that Vladimir shared, and it related to building that kind of technology to go out there and actually collect from a utility for a utility company. And one of the things they led with that I thought was so interesting, and it really is kind of a guiding principle: I cannot collect my way out of a bad end decision. So what this actually helps us to do is actually to make good decisions about how are you going to approach the customer to even try to collect, or how are you going to approach the customer in your other example about a credit, a credit risk assessment in a good way. And so it gets back to this whole thing about managing risk well, which is a core principle of Treasury, is risk management. To develop your strategies around that, to develop, like even looking at all of this data, when has this customer traditionally made a payment? That was one of the things that this utility company was looking at. How do they usually make a payment? What time of day do they do? What payment channel? All of those different, what kind of communication is the customer responding to? And to Tanya's earlier point, it takes into a real consideration where you're creating all of these really granular buckets related to your customer, so that you can actually create a collection, a whole experience that's really kind of tailored to them. And then it optimizes your ability to get that cash collected and into your operating coffers. So it's really exciting to see that there are really companies out there utilizing the use case technology that Vladimir was actually talking about. And you can really begin to see. I think it is important to say, having said all of that, the actual payment itself, I think most of us agree that we need to approach that with caution, because there are lots of gates and processes and governance that needs to be around that. So, but the process itself to get the data and how are you going to present it ends up being something that we can absolutely use machine learning, AI, all of these technologies that we're talking about today.
It's actually a really good point. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, it's
Please.
not even about fully replacing somebody, or the automation often serves, for example, as a recommendation system. So obviously these things are related to financial questions, and you don't want to leave it ungoverned. But it doesn't mean that you cannot use machine learning. You can still utilize it just to provide additional information for the person who is in charge, who is responsible for making the decision. So it was just a really good point. I wanted to talk about that.
Okay, I'd love to hear your feedback on the use cases, and then we want to jump in and actually show you an example of how technology can be used in Treasury. Tanya?
Cindy and Vladimir, they said it really well, and I agree. I was just thinking through, how do you use, like, you have this set of recommendations, you have this, let's say we are kind of one step in the future, and we have all these good recommendations and alerts at our disposal at any given time. The important thing is to take action, right? And so I think that we need to get into this mindset of, if you are moving from kind of catching up with work, we are moving to actually having everything online and at our disposal. We need to change this mindset of kind of proactively taking action, not just waiting on something else to happen, something, to go wrong. So what I always, I don't really like hearing is the phrase, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And sometimes it's true, but I think in this forward-looking conversation, we need to think how to do things better and actually fix some things that have been done in certain ways in the past, because this is a new paradigm, this whole shift in mindset with this data.
I think it's so interesting. One of the things, Vladimir, that you said when we were talking the other day that I thought was so important was really understanding, when do we need to interject a better process? Because these become tools in a toolkit. So, and I think to Tanya's point, it's like, when are those appropriate solutions that we really ought to start shifting and abandon some of those other things, even if they're working, they're maybe not efficient anymore. And it doesn't mean, I think, as so many are afraid that we're just gonna have these little robots in Treasury doing all this stuff. I mean, it does not replace the human element that we bring to the table, which is actually understanding the data that it's spitting out, and also verifying that the assumptions that it's making are absolutely true. So I think it's a comforting thing to realize that this is just like any other thing that we have seen in Treasury, for example, on different payment rails. We haven't switched everything in the world to a real-time payment because there's still value with ACH. As much as we might like to all get rid of checks, they're still out there. They're alive and well, and they have their spot where that's what you still need to issue. So it's the same way with this technology that we're all embracing and so believe in, is determining where it makes sense to start. And these use cases that Vladimir spoke of are such great places because it involves a lot of data that we can really affirm and utilize quickly, and make better decisions.
Cindy, thank you. Can everyone see my screen? Do you guys see the dashboard? Great. Yeah, perfect. So I want to take the next couple minutes and just show you, we've talked a lot in theory, but I want to show you putting theory into practice. This is a dashboard that was created really for a healthcare company, but don't look at it so much for a healthcare company, but just look at it in the company. It's about setting goals. It's about understanding where your cash is coming from, how it's coming in, how much is there. And I'm going to walk you through each part of it. This is, for this particular case, built on Power BI, but it is agnostic to any sort of, if you want to use Tableau, if you want to use Click, that's not an advertisement for them. It's what you feel comfortable with. You can build a dashboard. And I think the other point before I jump into it is that this is based on not tearing down your house, meaning you don't have to rent your ecosystem of your processes of the way you work, even down to spreadsheets, in order to achieve something like this. And that's the beauty of modern technology. You can take your spreadsheets and flow data into here. You can take whatever systems or ERPs you're using and flow it in here. You can merely renovate and not have to rebuild. And I think that's important because the fear with a lot of people and a lot of companies, first off, technology is never a problem. It's people that are the problem. People get scared. They work at a company. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to be blamed for changing something. And that's understandable. But also, you're used to working in one way. You've created efficiencies around it. You don't want to change the whole thing. So I'm just trying to reiterate that what's so great about modern technology is that you can take literally data from anywhere to create a modern approach using, and I'll get into it, machine learning and eventually AI. No, it's scary. We'll get into not scaring you so much with it in a few minutes. But wanted to just walk you through this quickly. So it's important, obviously, KPIs, goals. So in this particular example, this is a visibility dashboard of your cash flow, and it starts with the goals that you've set for daily cash collection. So in this particular example, we have a goal of $2,874,960, but we've only collected $2,856,409. Sorry about variance of negative 18,551. And this automatically tells you that you're at like 98% of goal. So it's a decent day. But then you go into where's the money coming from? So you have lots of different accounts, lots of different lockboxes. And what's interesting is this will tell you lockbox 1 is totally on target. You can even break it down to which see in a chart that lockbox 1 is collecting what it should. Lockbox 2 is where it should be. But lockbox 3 has a little bit more money in it than should. So a person like me would be like, that's awesome. But somebody in Treasury will say that's not awesome because now you have too much money. You got to figure out why you have too much money, where it's coming from. And now you don't have to go back and thumb through, spreadsheets or go to old collections. You can now understand that this particular account, and you can pinpoint where the money's coming from, because then I go to the next chart, which is, this organization, they have 3 hospitals. Again, you could have 50 hospitals, you could have 50 retail stores, it doesn't matter. We just use this as an example that these hospitals are showing you what their daily collection rates are, so you can pinpoint exactly why too much money is coming in from the prior day's collections. The other thing is that you will get alerts. So rather than having to come in on a Monday morning and say, oh my God, why does Lockbox 3 have too much money? You will get an alert as soon as the bank sends the data over to say, hey, Lockbox 3 is up significantly. You can get a text to your phone, you can get an email, so you can address the situation and not have to, again, get in on a Monday morning. If it's over the weekend or if it's over your own vacation, you'll get that alert. And then it also will alert you. You can create alerts on, just about anything. Significant increase in unapplied cash. Again, for people who are in Treasury, that is a huge problem. For someone like me, I would love it, but we're talking about influx business. And then this will actually break down by we did payers from insurance companies, where they're at in terms of the month and what the money that they owe the hospital and what percentage makes up the amount per lockbox. And then finally, we have a trend line of the unapplied cash, and we see that there's 4% unapplied cash. Tanya, I don't know if you want to go in and explain this in a little bit more detail, since you're kind of the expert in this. But before I go to the next dashboard, I don't know if you have any comments you want to make about this particular dashboard right here under visibility.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Well, that's actually a great example of, and so just for the audience, this is not necessarily an example of how you can have better cash visibility from your bank, because we do have, and we know that we have all the tools, and some companies are more, use more of them, like use TMS systems. Some companies still don't, and they have Excel-based kind of cash positioning process and all this. Or we also use modules in ERP systems. So this is not an example of how you can track your cash deposits better. Rather, this is an example of how you can bridge data internally. Because right here, this is an example of how you bridge, analysis of your collections with things like cost to collect, things like banking, things like how exactly how your cash exactly gets into your bank. Is it time efficient? Is it cost efficient? And like in your ERP system, for example, in your GL, so this whole cash application tracker, for example, this cash that you're getting, is it applied timely in your GL on your books? And if it doesn't, what prevents it from it? Because I rarely see this bridged really well in organizations. Very, very often departments have, siloed data. So Treasury will, will know everything about their banks and their accounts and their cash position, while, receivables, they are doing their own thing with their own pace. And very often CFO doesn't have all those reports in the timely manner, and it's hard sometimes to bridge what's really going on with cash in the terms of flow versus on books. And it just, I've personally been in a position when in one of the organizations, they needed, they were in distress. That was during COVID. They were in distress, and they really needed this cash flowing in from their largest customers timely. And so there was an ask to track it, almost, every few hours. And who do you think fulfilled this task? Obviously Treasury, because very often Treasury is the department that has immediate access to accounts, and they can analyze immediately what's going on. And then very often we end up doing this manually, just because there are systems in place that are configured to track certain things, but they're just not as online. So back to my kind of comments on having this data, access to this data online and readily available, and deriving insights, actionable items from this data. So this dashboard is an exact example of that. How do you actually, because each organization needs different, has unique processes and needs different trackers, so to speak, because they're trying to improve on certain weaknesses, right? So here's an example of how you can configure, and you should probably configure your data outside of all the products and systems that you're using, but like more configured to serve the uniqueness of your organization. And that's I think the most value lies in that.
Yep.
So yeah, back to you.
Does everyone see the control dashboard now? Okay. So the one thing I know everyone's kind of chomping at the bit to get into kind of the ML and AI portion. So I'm actually going to start with that. What we built into this dashboard is the ability to have a large language model. However, it could be on-prem. Again, I know people are really scared when they say AI, when they say ML. This is not going out to the internet. This is using your own data. So that if you wanted to type a question in there about, I want to see what deposit came in on May 20th, 2023, you would type that question in here and it would give you those deposits for them. It's pulling from your own data, which again, I go back to emphasizing the importance of, I always like saying where the bodies are buried. There are companies, major companies that have data sources that are literally under someone's desk that no one knows about, but that could impact and create efficiencies for the Treasury Department, for accounting, for the CFO, but they're not using the data in there. So this is an opportunity for you to understand where all the data sources are, leveraging that data and bringing it together so you can create machine learning models and then ultimately use AI to go back and get answers in seconds rather than having to go back and look at deposit slips and call the bank and go back to your spreadsheets. And I mean, this is not efficient. It can save you time to focus on making the company money and either understanding that you have a cash deficiency where you need to maybe go get a line of credit and that takes time, or you have a cash surplus, which is, the optimum thing, and you can invest that money and make more money. So, Treasury is becoming very complex and it's becoming a core part of every business. The next dashboard I want to go to, so this is kind of the AI that we built in large language model. Again, you could ask it, you could train it to ask any question regarding, things that happened 10 years ago. As long as you can flow the data in, you can train the model so that it can answer those questions. And again, I want to emphasize, this does not have to go out to the internet. This is your model that sits in your premise or in your cloud and is only using your data. The next part I want to go down to is the cost savings. This is automatic. I want to point out one quick thing because I know we're getting a little bit short on time, and I think it's important that we get into the whole AI thing. Improvement to cost to collect. Cost to collect is a huge amount of money. And the problem is that if you're not looking at it or staring at it in the face, how it changes, even on a daily basis, your company is spending a ton on getting on the cost to actually collect. And this is a great way to reduce your costs by having those APIs come in from the black boxes to, digitizing your deposits, to understanding what's coming in and how it's being paid and where it's being distributed to. A dashboard like this, and again, using data that doesn't have to come from a brand new system, but coming from something as simple as a spreadsheet, can really impact your bottom line. And just going through again trackers, alerts to your to what's going on, if there's something too high or too low. And then I think this is really important is forecasting. Again, as you get more data and as your models get smarter, they can start better forecasting. Why does Blue Cross Blue Shield have a negative 7.4? You're not going to find that out at the end of the month when you go through all the deposits they made. You're going to find that out that second, and you can be on the phone with them saying, what gives? Why are we down $7.4 million? That is, because again, you're losing money because they're holding your money. That's interest. That's your costs to operate. That goes into all of that. And if they can say, oh, this was an error on our part, we're going to deposit the money tomorrow. Well, that's a huge cost savings for the company over the course of a month or a year. So I actually want to, I'm actually going to go back. I don't know if anybody has any comments on this because I know we're getting down to the wire here and we still have a couple things to cover. I'm going to transition out of this back to our very pretty slides. Let me just change that. And I actually want, and we thought it was really important to turn this over to Vladimir to kind of talk through the importance of what the differentiation is between ML and AI. Is everyone back to the slide? TMBC
Yes.
Treasury use cases. We're going to go into technology and Treasury, which is kind of where we're at. Vladimir, I'd love to start out, and if we can go into, can you explain the basics of what's machine learning versus what's artificial intelligence? And I'd love to hear your take on it from a very, very basic level, because they're big buzzwords, and I don't think a lot of people, truly understand what it is, what it can do, and how it can help efficiencies in their businesses.
Okay, so I'll try to keep to the point, but I'll start with a point that, in my opinion, AI is more of a philosophical question and philosophical term than something technical, because it really goes into what we're considering as intelligence. So in this regard, machine learning is a more technical way of saying it, and machine learning is part of AI. There's nothing magical about it. It's just basically mathematics, where you have some algorithm that's been given some examples, and by providing them over and over again, and by saying whether it's correct or not, the algorithm is designed in a way so it adjusts its parameters, so it learns, quotes unquote, learns how to produce good results. Sometimes it's called weak AI, but in the majority of cases, when you will encounter this term AI, and if somebody uses it as a technical term, as like we've implemented AI, take it with a grain of salt, because it's mostly just a convenient way of saying so everybody understands that. You can call AI a lot of different things, even the machines built by Alan Turing can be considered as AI, and your laptop and stuff like that. Machine learning is just one of the instruments, one of the tools in the box, as Cindy said before. And it just goes through your data and tries to understand, again, not as we as an algorithm, understand how to best process it.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I didn't
Vladimir.
confuse you.
No. I think what you're saying makes sense. And I just actually want to jump to, if anybody's thinking about employing AI or wanting to bring, the magic, if you will, of machine learning or AI into their organization, specifically into Treasury, talk through some of the challenges that companies and that individuals should be aware of when implementing machine learning or AI, and also just talk through a couple of the pitfalls and challenges that they might face.
Yeah, I would probably list three main challenges, three main things that can go wrong. There are actually a lot more, but the main ones is, and the worst one, trying to implement AI and machine learning just for the sake of implementing AI, just because it's a buzzword. It's crucial that the task that you're gonna solve with AI, that it really needs AI, that it really needs classical approaches or modern, like large language models. It doesn't matter. You always want to use the right tool for the right task. Otherwise, it's just you're gonna end up, in the best case scenario, just you're not gonna go through the whole project, or in the worst case scenario, you will finish the project and then realize that you didn't have to do it and spend all of that money. The second part is data. Again, as Cindy said, I think, no, you said, yeah, I always repeat that one of the main principles in machine learning is trash in, trash out. No matter how complicated or sophisticated your model is, if the input data is bad, you will get bad results. If your input data is good, even a simple model will be able to do something useful with it. This is why you need to, AI and machine learning data science is not about actually training the models. It's one of the simplest parts. The main part is creating a data set labeling the data set, and assuring its quality. This is the biggest challenge. This is has the biggest impact. And the final aspect is trying to save money on the initial phase, because if you're not experienced in the field, especially AI, it's a very chaotic field. If you're not familiar with all of the more specific challenges that are out there, you can very easily fall victim to one of them and just be disappointed in the technology altogether, without realizing that it could be actually done if there were people involved who have some experience, or if you were given it enough time and resources. So this is definitely a technology that you would not want to implement in a rush. You need to take your time and go step by step, iteratively from a proof of concept, pilot project, MVP, and then integration and production. Don't just jump into the whole process immediately.
Vladimir, thank you. And I know that we're kind of almost up at the hour. I want to take the last couple minutes and just throw it out there. I know that we've covered a lot. We're happy to continue the conversation, so feel free to reach out. We're going to be sending this recording, but I wanted to see if there was any questions from the audience around anything that we discussed. Please feel comfortable to put it in the chat. I don't know, Max, do we have any questions from the audience or any audience right now? Okay, I have one. So I have a question from the audience. What resources would you recommend to learn more about AI in Treasury? Tanya or Cindy, I don't know that you want to take that.
And we were just I'm not sure if Cindy still has her connection, but we were discussing this the other day, just because I often hear this question from, during conferences and after almost each session related to AI. How can I learn more? Where do I go? And as Vladimir mentioned, this is a new field and sometimes gets pretty chaotic. So it's not like and I know that reputable universities starting to offer courses and programs on that. I never recommend, huge investments of time and money into something that you're not sure you're going to need. That being said, sometimes it does make sense, especially if someone wants to, to shift a little bit in their profession and take a deeper dive into into this technical field. But to me, and from our discussions with Cindy, I think just going to conferences and following newsletters from associations like Treasury related associations, finance groups, executive leadership groups, that's helpful, because they try to pull good resources together and publish articles about newer developments. In healthcare, we have associations for healthcare financial professionals, and in each industry, there are certain groups that offer content. And I think it's really important to follow and just kind of keep up with trends. And I think actually go to conferences and talk to people. It's always so valuable to have those discussions with peers and research and understand what others are doing and how it's working for them.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Cindy, I don't know that you had any comments. I see that you're connected, but I didn't know whether you had any comments on what resources you would recommend.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, not sure what happened to the video portion, but anyway, you can see a black box.
It's okay.
So I think that to mirror what Tanya said, I think that, reading a lot is helpful, even if it's just a sort of a summary overview, or, pay attention to when you hear AI, machine learning, just even, in news medias. I think it helps us to get comfortable with the idea of it, which, overcoming kind of a fear and understanding the definitions of what terminologies are related to the technology that we're working to adopt. And then I think also sometimes you've got to like stick your toe in and begin to do something. So finding something that's a low risk, where you begin to learn and teach yourself, when I've had conversations with other colleagues in Treasury, that's been one of the things that they have actually advised, is the fact that finally you find an area, maybe it's just that you begin to want to use machine learning and then layer in AI on top of just an instructional manual. And, I mean, that's very low risk, but you learn the elements about how to do it. And somewhere we have to actually start trying a little bit of it to build up our own confidence level. So I think that's another thing that people, can consider.
I love that.
Thanks, Cindy. And yeah, I know that we're right up on the hour, but there was one other question I think is important to address, and I'd actually like to take that one on myself very quickly before we just wrap up. And it's, how far is AI technology from replacing decision makers in Treasury? I want to say that I want to take that and extend that to all roles. And I think one of the misnomers about AI, at least right now, is that it's making decisions for you. It does not. AI only works as good as the ideas that you input into it. So yes, while there's ChatGPT, there's large language models, there's computer vision, there's all sorts of different forms of AI, as Vladimir mentioned, requires human thought to type in the ideas and to bring the ideas to light in order to make AI work for them properly, to create those efficiencies. AI is not even anywhere near at the point where it's starting to take over your jobs. I think people are scared that this big, green monster is going to come and take your job. And that's just not the case, because AI cannot live in a vacuum. It cannot live on its own. It's got to live with human interaction and human input. It will live side by side. But again, it's not, at least at this point, and I think we're very far away from that, doing the thinking for you. It requires the human thinking and human innovation and human ingenuity in order to make it really efficient. It's fast, it's smart, and it's amazing, but it is not. It is not replacing human work, the human workforce, or human ingenuity. I mean, humans invented it. So there you go. So listen, just to wrap up, I want to thank Cindy and Tanya and Vladimir for your time. This was an incredible discussion. We're going to be sending this out email. If there's more questions, feel free to email us back. We're going to be doing more of these things as time goes on. And listen, good luck in your endeavors, in your projects. Technology is taking over. As I said in the beginning, most companies are based on technology, and most companies are going to start employing AI, but it's just understanding how to do it right, how to do it, how to make sure that your data is good, and how to create efficiencies and not create more trouble for yourself. So anyway, I hope everyone is enjoying their summer. We'll talk soon, and good luck.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.